Hello, Instagram. Hello, YouTube. And hello, Facebook. We are here. We did it. It is April 19th, 2023, and we just finished the tax season deadline. So, if you had a corporation, a personal return, a foreign owned single member LLC, and or any other kind of entity that has the deadline of April 15th, this year it was pushed to April 18th. And if you didn't file an extension, you might be late. For all of my clients, I did file extensions. I didn't confirm with everyone. If you've been in touch with me and if you've been working with me, we already filed an extension for you. However, if you've been working with me in the past and you didn't reach out to me yet this year, I might have still probably filed an extension for you. What's up, Instagram? What's up, guys? And so we filed all the extensions, and that means we have 6 more months to file the actual tax return. Of course, I would love to file everything as quickly as possible, and I would love to get everything filed. So if you need help with tax compliance, whether you're a U.S. person, a foreign person, you have U.S. companies, you don't, whatever you're doing, let me know. I'm happy to help. It's cool to have some people here on Instagram because I'm on Instagram today. I'm really just excited to be back here. So if you guys have any questions, please post them in the chat and I'll answer your questions. I'd love to get into some scenarios, tax, accounting, finance, business. If you have something you're working on, you want an opinion, let me know. I have a list of questions that have come up in other videos from other calls. And I'm going to go through a lot of those questions. And I'm going to go through a lot of the questions that you have that you've been posting. So I have a huge list of questions, but if you have any questions in the meantime, definitely feel free to type them in here and I will answer that when we get to it next in line. And, I'm so happy to be back, be live. I'm taking a couple of weeks off because I've been doing, like I said, doing tax season, doing tax compliance. It's been extremely busy. So let me get into some of these questions. If you guys don't have anything else, we went over the update. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, what to do if you didn't file your 2022 extension is first review and see if you actually had to file. Some people don't have to file. Number 2 is maybe an old CPA you've worked with filed it for you, even though you didn't ask him to. And then number 3 is then figure out what you really need to report, because I've seen people get penalized for reporting things that they weren't supposed to have reported. So it's probably best to I don't know if I'm a little biased, but it's probably best to get a professional opinion especially if you're late. If you're doing it yourself and you're using my course or any of that kind of stuff, that's probably going to have a lot of information in there and we'll review it for you. But in general, I recommend if you're going to be filing late and you have forms 5472, 5471 or foreign forms, that you get an opinion on it. If you're a U.S. person, like a regular person, you have a W-2 and you didn't file an extension, you actually won't have any penalties as long as you don't owe any money. So a lot of people, for example, if you just have a regular job and they withhold taxes from you, it's very likely you actually won't owe any taxes. So if you don't file your tax return on time, you still don't get any penalties. The IRS will pay you interest for paying if they're holding your money too long. I do have one question on here. Okay, a question in Spanish. I'm going to do a Spanish one after this one, unless I'm too tired. But the Spanish call, yeah, I guess I'll just do it. La declaración anual debe hacerse aunque la LLC tenga menos de un año. Técnicamente, si una LLC tiene solo un miembro, un dueño, y abriste la compañía durante el año, lo debe reportar, lo debe hacer la presentación. Si no puedes o no hiciste, el riesgo es muy bajo, pero técnicamente un pago conectado a la formación de la compañía sea una transacción reportable. Back to English. I'm going to go through some of these questions on here. Hi, Emily. Let me wave. Boop. Okay, so I have some questions on here. The first question. Can a foreign-owned single-member LLC with a valid... hold on. I should have read it before I start reading it. Can a foreign person with an SSN who has a single-member LLC use their EIN number or SSN and report as a business? Okay. This is confusing. Let me do this one more time. A Turkish citizen who has a social security number and also has an LLC and is doing business with their LLC, that's the background, can they claim a treaty position with a WABEN? And the answer would be yes. If you are based in treaty, you can claim a treaty position between the U.S., your client in the U.S., and yourself in Turkey. So that's to say that if you're based in Turkey and you're getting paid by an American company and they intend to withhold taxes, you can claim the treaty in order to have them not withhold taxes. Often, as a contractor, and a U.S. company shouldn't and won't withhold taxes. My non-resident contractors, I don't withhold taxes on my payments to them because it's not required. They're not doing any personal services in the U.S. So the answer is yes, you can, and that comes down to how to fill the form WABEN. If you're claiming a treaty rate, it's a little bit different because after the first section, you just have to put your basic info. In the next section, you have to put the treaty information. You have to put the article of the treaty, against what income and what's the rate of withholding. And he wants to claim 0% rate of withholding for independent personal services. So that's fun. Not every country has a tax treaty with the U.S., but apparently Turkey does. I don't have them memorized. I just Google them when I need to see. Okay, so understanding the WAB form, that's really one thing you need to know. Like, you can claim treaty positions. One important point here also with this is that you cannot claim a U.S. tax. You cannot claim the U.S. side of a tax treaty. So if you have a U.S. single member LLC, you can't claim a U.S. tax treaty with another country. So if you're using your LLC, I have clients who use their LLC to do business with Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan is trying to withhold taxes. They can't claim the U.S. tax treaty because they're not a U.S. corporation or a U.S. taxpayer. They're a foreign-owned single member LLC, so they can't claim the tax treaty. So that's actually a really good question. And I'm gonna talk about this really quickly because I was talking to this company the other day, and they were telling me that the WABEN forms need to be sent to the IRS. And I read through the instructions again, and I don't see that being required. And I'm just interested to see when the IRS will actually, give us some guidance on what we're supposed to do with these forms. And I think it's really interesting. Oh, hold on. I have another question. Hola, ¿cómo puedo yo, siendo de Panamá, abrir una cuenta de PayPal de Estados Unidos siendo un simple particular? Necesitas un ITIN para tener una cuenta de PayPal como una persona, pero si tiene una compañía, yo estoy viendo que PayPal está permitiendo que compañías tienen cuentas de Estados Unidos. And I'm going to comment on that in English now too. People historically, especially e-commerce people who have wanted PayPal accounts, I want to comment on how to get a PayPal account because I've had clients reach out to me who have had money locked in their personal PayPal account, and they've switched it to a U.S. business PayPal account. They haven't had ITIN numbers, but they've been able to release their funds and switch it to a U.S. business account in PayPal by just calling them repeatedly and just forcing them to switch it. So it's been a new development because before you definitely needed an ITIN. Right now you might not need an ITIN, but you just have to call them a lot and kind of push through it to get it to happen. So it's a little bit different. So let me see. I have a bunch of questions here. I wanted to share one more thing. Well, actually, let me answer some questions. I'm gonna pull up this. There's a really important court case going on, and I'll put that up after I answer these questions. It's going to be. One of my colleagues sent me a crazy new development regarding 5471 and 5472 penalties. And I should make a separate video on its own about this. But let me read a little bit of the case for you guys, because this is a really, call it a new case. Like, this is the IRS cannot collect penalties for late filed form 5472. So, and this just happened on April 3rd, 2023, the tax court issued a blow to the IRS ability to collect certain international information return penalties in the case of Fari versus Commissioner, the court held that the IRS lacks substantial authority to assess penalties asserted under Section 6038B, and that's about the foreign reporting. In doing so, the court barred the IRS from utilizing its traditional and expansive administrative collection powers to collect such penalties and opened up the service to future challenges on similar grounds. Pursuant to Section 6038A, taxpayers who have certain interests in foreign corporations during the year are required to file 5471. Let's scroll down. The IRS may impose a $10,000 penalty per year and a continuation penalty of $10,000 of up to 30 days, up to $50,000 if the form is not filed. It's a very similar provision it's the same type of penalty as a 5472. So we would have precedent to apply on whatever decision is determined here against what we've been filing for most of the people watching this channel. But between 2003 and 2010, Mr. Farhi owned 100% interest in two Belize corporations, and then the IRS just assessed penalties, and they attempted to collect the penalties with a levy. And the tax court sided with the taxpayer, finding that while Congress had expressly authorized the assessment of other penalties of the Internal Revenue Code, it notably had not done so for those imposed by Section 6038B. So that is to say that if you, hey, what's up, M. Yales? What's up, my guy? How you doing? So if you have not filed these forms, then Congress said they sided with the taxpayer, and they said the IRS can't collect these penalties. So we're going to see what happens. This case is still being appealed. There was an appeal filed, so I will know more, and I'll talk more about this later. I know I might be going over some of you guys' heads about the this like filing and this court case, but I wanted to get into that. So let me go back to the YouTube because I have some questions on here. So Samuel has a question. Let me share it and this is from YouTube. So hey, Instagram, I have a question on YouTube. Jump over there and follow me on YouTube if you're not. Hi, thanks for your time. I'm forming an LLC company to do commerce cryptocurrency to USD and use cryptocurrency, not big amounts, max 68,000 a month. Do I need a money transmitter license for that? I will only be moving my own capital. The payment will be Zelle and 3 different bank accounts. Normally, the biggest transaction is $500. Will be more or less 170 transactions. If you do this kind of work, the banks will close your accounts, and you probably do need a license to do this work. I've been learning more about this. So that's a good question, but yeah, you probably do need one to do that legally. I'm learning more about that stuff. But if you're just buying and selling crypto through banks using Zelle, it's kind of risky. The biggest risk is that they're going to close your accounts, but that's really not if you tell the bank what you're doing, they're not going to let you do it, and it's probably for a reason. So I have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. I think you probably do need a money transmitter license. Good question though. Let's see. Do I have any questions up here on Instagram? I do. Give me a second. Let me see. He says, ended up not filing 5472 and 1120 this year since I don't have an EIN yet. Nothing to worry, right? Well, as far as the IRS is concerned, you don't even exist. So I don't think you have anything to worry about. And that question would come down here. Do I have to file a 5472 if I don't have my EIN number? And if you applied for the EIN number and you didn't get it, then you can't file the form. And the IRS doesn't even know your business exists. Technically, if it was open, you would, but I think that would be extremely tedious for the IRS to penalize you in that instance. Let's see. I have another one. Okay, good. Answer all those. So let me go back to some questions. Should you buy a house under your personal name or an LLC? That's a great question. And it depends where you live. It depends your nationality. It depends your objective with the house. And it depends on so many different factors. I know you guys hate to talk to accountants because we always say it depends. But it really does. If you're doing it for business, then certainly, yes, you should buy a house under the LLC name. If you're buying a house under your personal name, I mean, if you're buying a house for you to live in, you should put it likely under your personal name. And it's just going to be easier. You have a homestead exemption. Maybe you want to use a family trust, but if you have a mortgage on it, there might be limitations on the different ways you can structure the ownership. So I can tell you concretely that if you're using it for business, I would definitely put it under an LLC. If the property is in another country, then you have to check your local property laws, and maybe it will make sense, maybe it doesn't. It depends what countries you're in. It depends the property ownership laws in that country, and it depends on how you want to set up your asset protection, your asset planning stuff. Because when you're dealing with real estate, it's really important to protect your assets, like legally. Watch out for your legal liability protection. So when you're buying a house in your personal name, some of the advantages are that it's easier and that it's faster and that you don't have any paperwork to do. The disadvantages are, another advantage would be that you might get a different homestead exemption. You might get lower tax rates by owning it personally. But in Florida, for example, even if you own it in an LLC, you can still claim the homestead exemption. I believe you can. I don't own a house in Florida, but I believe you can do that in Florida. The disadvantages are that you don't have legal liability protection, and if you decide to rent it, all your assets are potentially at risk. But if it's really just a personal asset they're using and you're a U.S. citizen, a U.S. resident, owning it in your own name is fine. It also changes based on the residency of the person buying the house. If you're a foreign person and you own real estate in your own name, you're potentially at risk for estate taxes should you die and you still own the property in your own name. So it's something that you really need to be on top of and to review. It's terrible when a family member passes, and then it's even worse, insult to injury, when they pass and then you think you're going to inherit some property, but you have to file estate tax returns and pay a 40% tax on the value of that property before being able to even take ownership of it or sell the property. It's extremely tedious, and it's definitely something to consider when buying real estate, especially if you're a foreign person. Okay, let's go to the next page. Oh, wow. This is a long one. Let me check this for a second. Okay, this is a long question, but if these two guys, a friend and I, are planning to sell a video game that we made on UA's Best App Store. Can a non-U.S. resident and a non-U.S. citizen, I'm assuming the non-U.S. resident is a citizen, set up an LLC in their home country to receive royalties from a U.S.-based app store for a video game they developed with a friend from a different European country? So the issue is that with royalties, when you're receiving royalties, whoever's paying you these royalties, if it's from sales to U.S. people and it's an actual royalty, they're going to withhold taxes on that. So it's best to claim a treaty position. I have one client who sells video games and apps and stuff, and what he does is he uses, I believe, a Cyprus company because they have a 0% royalty rate and a 0% withholding rate on royalties. They do have taxes in Cyprus, and they do have to deal with all of that over there, but they don't have to pay any taxes on the royalties. There's no withholding on the royalties. It's a little bit tricky. If you have a multi-member LLC, you're kind of posturing like you're a U.S. person, and you are, but then your partnership technically would have to withhold taxes on that royalty income. There's a way to pay yourself fees and commissions and drain out a lot of the profit attributable to that royalty income. But it's a really tricky thing. And it's, if you have it all structured like that and the IRS sees it, depending on how much money you're making, it could be a really tricky thing to do. So, it's important to review that the right way.
I got the key.
Oh, my screen turned off.
I hide it.
Get out of here. Okay. Buddy, get out of here. Give me a second. Get out of here. I'm live, buddy. Oh, sorry, guys. I have it locked in my room, but my son stole the keys and he hid the keys somewhere, and then he found the keys and then he came in. Let me see. No more questions on YouTube. What is so to go back to that question, the tax considerations for non-U.S. citizens receiving royalties are that if you receive it on your own name or through a single member LLC, the people who are paying you will withhold taxes. They should, at least, based on your sales inside the U.S. If you're using a corporation, they shouldn't withhold taxes, but then you should be paying taxes on your profits. You can pay yourself for services performed to reduce the amount of taxes you would pay, but there's other considerations like transfer pricing considerations and things you need to review. This is something that if you have a big, large-scale game, you're making a lot of money and you're getting royalties, it's something that we need to make a plan for. It's a little bit, these are always very nuanced, okay? So I think I kind of went through that a little bit. I'm going to try and be more organized. I have a question from the Instagrams. What's up, Bilal? What is the income amount limit the foreign LLC zero corporate tax? A foreign-owned single-member LLC doesn't pay any taxes, and it's not about the amount of income. It's more about the amount of activity performed inside the United States. So if you're not doing any work in the United States, you wouldn't be paying income taxes in the United States. So it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how much money you make. It matters where you're performing the services. Underrated studios. What's up, Wave? Thanks, RHD. What else we got? Rob Manio. What's up, Rob? Instagram is more fun than YouTube because I can see who's on here. Okay. So like I said, if you guys have questions, let me know. I'm happy to try my best to answer and give you good advice, even though most of it depends. Let me get back to my list over here because I have more questions. Let's date answer here. Okay, I'm going to open a single member LLC as a non-resident and all of the income. Okay, I'm just reading through this question really quick. I understood at least that I have to avoid the substantial presence test. Interested. So this question is a little longer. My summary is not as good here. As I'm living outside the United States with zero tax, as long as I'm not providing it. What will the implications be if I provide timely limited services? Okay, so this I'm going to say, if you're a foreign person and you have an LLC and you're operating with your LLC outside the U.S. and you have no U.S. trade or business, you don't pay taxes in the U.S. But what happens if you do travel to the U.S.? Technically, you're going to pay tax on the income you earn in the U.S. And technically, depending on how they're paying you, they might be required to withhold taxes on that. So if you are getting paid by someone who pays you a lot, like for example, if I have employees, if I have contractors of mine that I'm paying all the time and they come and spend 3 months in the U.S., technically I should withhold 30% on whatever I pay them, and they should pay U.S. taxes. And that's kind of my responsibility, but I'm supposed to know. The thing is that most of the people paying you aren't going to know, and they won't do it. And the U.S. IRS is a little bit disorganized, so I think the risk is pretty low because there's no like real mechanism for knowing that. But as long as you're not passing the substantial presence test, and you're coming in for holiday and you're coming in for vacation, and you just so happen to do some work while you're here, I think it's a pretty low risk. However, if you're coming to the U.S. For 150 days a year, and you're going and you're working full time for an employer, let's say you work at like an auto parts manufacturing company and you provide consulting on site, they should probably withhold taxes on those payments, and you should probably pay tax on those because you're doing legit work. The opposite example is, let's say you come in and you maybe meet some clients, you're doing some light consulting and you're working on your computer while you're in the US. That's like much more nuanced and much more kind of gray area. Like you probably won't have a problem. But if you're coming on extended work trips to work specifically for someone in their location, they're probably going to withhold taxes. But if they're not withholding taxes, your risk is pretty low of anyone knowing that you got those payments. So I hope that I don't want you guys to like not pay your taxes or do things that are not right, but I want you to understand what you should be doing, and then the risks of taking other positions. Like if taking a position is basically saying that you view what you're doing as something else, as what the IRS views it as, and it's your position that you're not working, and that you're there just helping or talking or meeting people. And the IRS's position will be that you were doing work, right? I see the audits are going up. There are a little bit more audits than before, and that's something we're dealing with, but it's not too crazy. Okay, next question. As a single member LLC owner, do I need to report both my personal accounts and my LLC accounts on my FBAR filing? That's a great question, and you only need to report foreign LLC accounts. We've talked about this before, but if you're a foreign person, you don't have to comply with FATCA and file foreign bank account reports. If you are a foreign person and you have an LLC, and that LLC has real bank accounts, foreign bank accounts, the LLC does technically need to report those accounts, and that would be considered like real bank accounts. A WISE account for your LLC, is it really? It isn't really a bank account. WISE is licensed in the U.S. and does business in the U.S. Then you wouldn't have to do it for a WISE account. But if you're in Panama and you open an LLC bank account for you in Panama, then technically you would have to report that. So it's a little bit trickier there. But it's really not that common at all. Like people aren't doing that. People aren't opening. Like it's really hard to open an account in another country, especially for a U.S. company. Okay, so Juan, if I didn't file in time and don't have an extension, what should I do? How do I get in touch with you or your team? Well, you can get in touch with us easy. Just email support@jamesbakercpa.com. But if you didn't file the extension, then, like I said before, you need to first review if you need to actually file, if you have a filing requirement. If you don't have any, if you're a foreign-owned single-member LLC, you don't have any reported related party transactions, then you don't actually have to file anything. And sometimes if you have an account and you're just maintaining it, you might not actually have to file. If you have a multi-member LLC and you didn't have any income or expenses, you don't have to file. The partnerships, the multi-member LLCs were due to be filed March 15th. So those are really late. The penalties are much lower for that, but it depends on how many partners you have. And then the third consideration is, if you should file or not. I think I do have to file any options, or is it just penalties? I think if you file now, the IRS is still pretty disorganized. I think you can sneak through and get the return file without getting any automatic penalties assessed. I would still think about what you're filing for. If you're filing for a big business with a lot of transactions, I would probably consider still doing it, especially because we just learned that the IRS can't even assess the penalties. Technically, they have to use a third party, and they don't have that functionality yet. So I think the risk is pretty low from that end. But yeah, I would do it that way. I would contact our team to see if you should file. We can give you some more advice. Okay, so I have a question in Spanish over here. I'm sorry for my English only speakers, but I speak Spanish too. I'm supposed to do Spanish calls separately, but I really would rather I'd rather just do one long AMA and not do multiple ones in different languages. It's exhausting. Tengo mi LLC registrada en New Mexico y quiero instalarme en Houston para aplicar a la visa E2 de inversionista. ¿Tendría que registrar también la empresa en Texas o tener un agente registrado allí? Yo voy a recomendar que trabajes con un abogado migratorio, un abogado de inmigración. Y en mi experiencia, ellos recomiendan que abre una compañía nueva y hace la transferencia de su inversión en esa compañía separado, y no se usa la misma compañía, porque eso ya tiene el dinero y tiene que transferir el dinero y tener una vista de ese dinero entrando. Entonces, probablemente ellos van a recomendar que abres una otra compañía. Pero buena pregunta, gracias. Mohammed, has a question. I want to start creating courses on Udemy. What are the taxes related to digital products? I would love to know how Udemy taxes products on that platform. I imagine they would report it as royalties. I can't confirm, but I imagine they would report it as royalties and withhold taxes. That's why a lot of people instead will sell on Hotmart or on a private a private platform like a Kajabi or a Teachable or something like that. I understand putting on Udemy for the exposure. I'm not against it, but it's possible that they will withhold 30% taxes on those transactions. So I would just put your courses everywhere and sell as much as possible. Once you start making a lot of money, we can review it in more detail. Okay. Went over that one. Okay, I have another question here. Let me get a sip real quick. Good, I got a question. I'll answer this first. Could we amend a 1040 for some mistakes made in one of the FATCA account reporting within a week of filing a 1040? Yeah, you can amend a return at any time. The 1040 would only be amended to change the form 8938 filing in regards to your FATCA stuff. So it wouldn't really necessarily be the 1040 you'd be amending unless you're filing that form as well. But yeah, you can file it. The thing is, I might wait a little bit for that just because you might have more stuff to file for later. And then you're going to be filing multiple extensions and it gets really messy. Hold on. So I would wait a little bit on that. Another Instagram question. If I'm dealing with a neutral paymaster in USA for a non-US business client, do the IRS consider this as US source income? I don't know what the transaction is about, but every time I hear about a paymaster, I think it's a scam because everything that I've ever dealt with involving a paymaster has been either a scam. It's been but I don't know. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you have a real paymaster. I hope you do. So in terms of the source of the income, that's really where the transaction is taking place. If there's just a paymaster here, but you're selling land in Indonesia and they are brokering the deal in the U.S. through a paymaster in the U.S., then it wouldn't necessarily be a U.S. source income. And also, the sourcing of the income doesn't matter. First, it matters, do you have a U.S. trade or business? If you don't have that, then it can be U.S. source income. You still wouldn't pay tax on it, depending on the category of income. So that's the second thing to determine is what's the category of income. And like if you have a U.S. trade or business, but it sounds like you don't. So you wouldn't pay tax on it, even if it is U.S. source income. Okay, Ariel has a question back on YouTube. As part of a multi-member LLC with 2 foreign owners, what other form do we need to file along with the 1065? Is there a form that needs to be submitted under each individual partner? Well, when we prepare these forms, there's different schedules and subschedules that may or may not be applied based on the questions of the Schedule B on the pages, 2, 3, and 4 of the K1. I think it's just 2 and 3. Excuse me. And depending on your answers to those questions, there may be additional forms and schedules you have to file. You have to potentially file a K2 and a K3, depending on where you're doing business. Actually, you probably do have to file a K2 and a K3, and those would be attached to the K1s. And the K1s are forms that need to be submitted under each partner. So I don't really know if you're doing this yourself and you have a lot of business activity, it might make sense to have a professional do it for you. But if you want to do it yourself, I think I even have like a $200 course that you can buy that goes over a lot of the basics of filing these forms. But it's pretty nuanced. You know, I would be pretty surprised if I saw a form done perfectly correct, especially if a 1065 done by a client. But I have seen some that are really good. Mohammed says, what would be an excellent legal protective mechanism for a freelancer working with a U.S. client? This freelancer is a non-U.S. citizen and non-U.S. resident. So Legal protected mechanisms are contractor agreements. So you would have an agreement with your employer saying that you're a contractor. That's the best way to protect yourself. Also, I like using companies, so you have legal liability protection for your own assets. You look like a young guy, so I don't know how much assets you may have, but the idea is that if you do something in the course of your work that damages or creates a lot of damages, then it would be potentially expose you and your personal assets to demands. The guy below commented that you should have a trust. Trusts are really complicated. Trusts are great. Trusts I find are best for like estate tax planning. So when you have a lot of money and you need to separate it and not have control of things, then using a trust is great. I think for most of the people that ask me about it, it really seems like overkill. In the U.S., there's a concept about family trusts that makes a lot of sense. And if you are considering a family trust and you live in the U.S., that's an estate tax thing, but it doesn't impact your taxes at all. You basically have everything owned by the family trust and it all passes through to you as it would as if you owned it directly. So, that's the mechanism I would say for a freelancer, just use an LLC. LLCs are amazing. Okay, answered that. Still got like 10 people here between the two. I love this. I'm happy to help, guys. Let me know if you have other questions. I'm gonna go back to what I was doing on here. Will using a different address for a postal service for my U.S. LLC registered agent create a permanent establishment in the U.S.? The short answer is no. I mean, how to avoid creating a permanent establishment in the U.S. for your LLC is a real long video that I can make in more great detail later. And a great source for that is reading through tax treaties and determining how the different treaties define what is permanent establishment. If you have a tax treaty between your home country and the U.S., you can apply that tax treaty and generally not have permanent establishment. I have a client who is it's a Polish company. There's a U.S.-Poland tax treaty, and they are able to send a whole team of workers into the U.S. to install something as long as they're not here for more than 6 months, and that would still prevent them from having permanent establishment. So it's something that is, it's defined, and you can look into it. And generally, just having an address won't create a permanent establishment. Just having an address is just going to be an address. It is what it is. And there's court cases in the past, the IRS versus Piedras Negras is one of my favorites from the books back in the 50s about a radio station in Mexico, and they had an office in a hotel right across the border where they got all their mail. They met, they had board meetings, they did stuff but the IRS determined they had their activity didn't rise up to meet the required amount for taxation for having a taxable U.S. trade or business. So they got out of it, and they had a whole mail room. They met for meetings. They had a big office space. They had all this stuff. So way more, and the IRS ruled, and we can use those rulings as precedent if you ever were to go to tax court for this, which is very unlikely. Oh, I have that hit. Okay, take that off. Can you borrow against the equity in a U.S. LLC bank account to take a tax-free profit in Canada? Very interesting. So I have to do more cross-border business strategy videos between the U.S. and Canada because I'm trying to learn more and understand more and interview more experts about these topics. And we have some real great notes in here for me, but the real question is, can you borrow against the equity in a U.S. bank account? I mean, equity would mean cash. Can you borrow against the cash in a bank account? I don't really think it works like that. I'm sure if you can find someone that would do it, that's great. I mean, you're basically giving them money and they're loaning you money. Borrowing against equity is generally done, on stocks, or on property. So if you had real estate, you can borrow against the equity in the real estate and take a second mortgage or whatever, but you don't really do it against cash. So if you have a bank account, I don't think it really works like that. maybe there's something I don't know here or that I'm missing, but in the case of answering the questions, can you take the tax-free profit? Can you take the money back to Canada? If you're taking a loan, then it's not income. So I imagine if you take a loan in Canada, you wouldn't pay tax on it because it wouldn't be income. It would just be a loan. So there wouldn't be any tax on that. And in Canada, they could do what the U.S. would do and say, no, this is not a loan. This is a distribution. You have to pay tax on this distribution. But if you have the documentation, you have the contracts, you have the agreements, and it's a loan, you wouldn't pay tax on it. So I have another question from Mohammed here. Is the LLC only helpful for protecting the personal assets? What about the freelancer who doesn't have any assets and that can be used in the case of a lawsuit? So you don't have any money and you're just getting started, like you have no risk. It's easier to open bank accounts. It looks more professional. There's more things you can apply for as a foreign person to have that U.S. tax ID, even though it's a business tax ID. I would recommend using one. It shows that you're serious and you're thoughtful about your business. Like when I pay someone in a Wise account in their own name, or I pay a wire to a company name, I'm like, there's a little bit of intrigue there, and there's a little bit of me knowing that they thought about this a little bit more. So this all intangible stuff. To be honest, it's all intangible stuff. Sorry if I look like I'm squinting. I have this light right in my face. When I'm doing taxes here, I just sit here in the dark. But now I want to be seen. Help you guys out. What's up, Mark S? Wave. Sorry if this is shaking too much. So I have another question. What are the tax filing requirements for non-U.S. citizens who own a U.S. LLC but didn't make any income in the U.S.? If you didn't make any profit, that doesn't really matter. If it's a multi-member LLC, you have to file a partnership return. If it's a single member LLC, you have to file that 5472 report, and that would be reporting related party transactions. If you have a multi-member LLC and you're filing a partnership, you don't have to file a tax return if you have no income or expenses. If you do, you have to file form 1065. If you have an LLC that's elected to pay taxes as a corporation, you have to file a form 1120 and calculate your income and expenses and carry forward your tax losses to the next tax year. What's up, Maricel? Hi. I waved. Okay. So that's a good question there. What's the best entity structure to use for a 1099 via an employer? Well, if they're an employer, they won't be giving you a 1099. They would be a contractor, I suppose, because a 1099 is for contractor payments or contractee. But if someone's paying you for work as a contractor, you have the most flexibility. The best entity structure depends on your tax situation. For a foreign person, it's going to be either personally or in a single member LLC, potentially a multi-member LLC if you have partners, and because those wouldn't be subject to tax in the U.S. if you're a foreign person. If you're a U.S. person, you have completely different things to consider. How much other income do you have? How much are you getting paid? How much expenses do you have? When did you get paid? A lot of people use S corporations. A lot of people use LLCs. It depends where you live. It depends what place you're in. For example, if you're a resident of New York City and you made $40,000, it might make sense not to deal with the S corp stuff and just put on a Schedule C, because New York City taxes S corporations, and it's a lot of additional filing. So it depends on all of those things. It always depends. I can't explain a whole. I could invent a whole hypothetical situation and then give you an answer, but if it doesn't follow you, then it's completely unrelatable to anyone. And the chance of me guessing your situation in a hypothetical is extremely slim. So I'm just going to keep throwing out a bunch of different scenarios and answers. So I'm on my last question here. If a non-U.S. business owner hires a U.S. citizen living abroad as a contractor and opens an LLC, would the business be subject to U.S. taxes if the contractor moves back to the U.S.? Can the business use a Laban IBFC company to open a U.S. LLC for banking purposes? So that's an interesting question. I'm going to cut it down to here. If a U.S. if a foreign person is getting paid into an LLC and they're making money for contracting, and then they move to the U.S., after they arrive in the U.S., all the money they earn after that date would be subject to taxes in the U.S. The money they earned before that wouldn't be subject to any taxes. So, as a cutoff date, So once you come and land in the U.S. and you become a resident, even if you're not a resident right away, the residency start date is the first 10-day period you're in the U.S. There's exclusions, exceptions as to your residency start date, but it's generally when you arrived in the U.S. the first time. If you come in for 5 days, leave, and 6 months later come in and stay, you could probably exclude that. But if you stay in here for, I think there's a 10-day exclusion. It's very nuanced, but once you are a U.S. tax resident, you can't really open foreign companies and leave money in there and not pay taxes on it, because you're required to disclose the ownership of all foreign corporations or foreign entities under Form 5471. And while that earth-shattering case we reviewed earlier says the IRS doesn't have a rights to collect those penalties through the IRS collection system, which is issuing levies and everything, they can just going to put you in regular U.S. collections instead of using the powerful arm of the IRS, the biggest collections tool ever, just to take your money. They can't use that. They have to go through old school collections methods, which is like not as effective. So it's really awesome for everyone who is potentially has some exposure to this. In any case, you can't really do that. Once you come to the U.S., you should do some pre-immigration. Well, before you come, you should do pre-immigration tax planning. If you have foreign assets, then that's something that we want to plan for before you become a resident. You need to do the immigration legally, and you need to work probably with an immigration attorney for something so important. I would use an attorney. And yeah, but you can't. Let's see. The answer is, can the business use? The last question is, would the business be subject to U.S. taxes if the contractor moves back to the U.S.? So I guess to round that off full circle, if a U.S. person like myself has an LLC, the LLC on its face wouldn't pay any taxes. I would pay taxes on my personal tax return. So the LLC would never be subject to taxes unless you make some kind of election. Only the person who owns the LLC would pay taxes. Okay, I have one more from Mohammed. What are the benefits of having an LLC in the U.S. compared to having a UAE LLC? I'm always struggling between the two. As a foreigner, I have no tax liability for both. Well, it depends on how you want to operate your business. If you're doing e-commerce in the U.S. or selling to Americans, it might be easier to get paid with a U.S. company. It might be cheaper to run a U.S. LLC instead of a UAE LLC as well. Could be really complicated and expensive to run those kind of companies. I know they're a little bit more expensive. Open both and make that decision later. You have a lot of options. It all depends on what your purpose are, what your goals are, and like how you want to get paid. But I like having more options to get paid. If I lived in the UAE, I would use both. Okay, guys, I did all the questions that I had written. I have all the questions here. I think I answered all the questions here. Mark had one follow-up, but as a Florida resident. So as a Florida resident, running your 1099 through an S Corp would probably be best, Mark. Because you get to save on payroll taxes, and I'll make some videos about that. Sorry you had a tough time, Ariel. I think Danny's been really awesome for all our clients. He's just the front end, but I'm happy to still be adding value for you here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions, Mohammed. I'll see you guys next Wednesday. I'll be on again next Wednesday, and every Wednesday is the plan. What's up, Negro Wilson? How you doing? Thanks for being here. Thanks, Mark. You're so nice. So yeah, guys, any other questions? Send me an email. Send us emails. Post on here or whatever, and we will. I'll answer them on the next call. I'm so happy to be back. And if you need help with accounting, tax services, you can contact me or my team. And that's what I do all the time when I'm not doing these free live calls. I'm doing client work and referrals and setting people up on stuff. Okay, so have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. and we will all. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you, Muhammad. You're the best, man. We'll be in touch. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next one.